Hello and welcome to Art Matters, the show where we discuss Portsmouth's local art scene and showcase the creative community. This week we are chatting to Clarke Reynolds, aka the Blind Braille Artist. Now, before we start the interview with Clarke, I want to mention that we have a live art project happening right now. Claire will be designing an opening title card to the show. So with that being said, let's start discussing everything art. Clarke.
Hi, Steve.
Really nice to see you. It's not like we haven't been together in the recent weeks. How are you, my friend?
Busy, really busy. I don't think I've ever been so... I'm more busy going blind than I had when I had sight. I mean, that's an oxymoron in itself, really, isn't it?
I think so. I mean, I've watched you travelling all around the country in the last few weeks and months, literally being with you some of that steps of the way. But this is all about Portsmouth. So I think what would be really good to hear is kind of what your relationship started like with Portsmouth and how maybe that has kind of led you to art, and we'll pick between those parts of your story, I think, as we go through the interview. Is that all right?
That's fine. So for me, we're in the Eldon building, and literally a stone's throw from here is where I used to live, in Leamington House, which is a council block flat, 17 floors. But as we speak, I think it's been demolished brick by brick, which is quite sad, but in a way, hopefully something new will spring from it. And obviously growing up in that environment, it was like you couldn't really go out as such, the bullying, the drugs, it was horrific. And art came to me accidentally. I went to Cottage Grove School, and we were fortunate enough that Aspects, which is now Art Space, they took us to on Borough Road. And as a 6-year-old, I went to that space and it was like, oh, this is interesting. I've never been to a gallery before. Then my family are artistic, so we never went to any of the galleries. And I knew from that moment on that I wanted to be an artist. It was something about that freedom of having a sketchbook, drawing, allowed me to ignore what was going on socially in my life. And most people, when they at that age, they want to be a fireman or an astronaut. They're never going to be that. That's just what their imagination takes them to it. But for me, I never gave up on that dream of being an artist, no matter my struggles through life, kidney problems and sight loss. I'm still an artist.
I think one of the things you've said to me a few times is that art has, in some ways, saved your life. And I don't know. I mean, is there a particular time that that really springs to mind about how it's helped you so much that it's kind of kept you going?
I had a younger brother, only 2 years younger than me. Unfortunately, he was in and out of jail, quite a tearaway. And I had my sketchbook. Unfortunately, he passed away 4 years ago on the streets of Newquay, homeless, at the age of 35. And I believe if I never picked up that sketchbook or pencil, I would have been in the same boat as my brother. So for me, it was an early on age that, that teenage life where your impactfulness, what's going on in your surroundings. If I never had that art in my life, I would have been one of those statistics just like my brother.
So, wow, that really shows the power of art, I think.
Yeah, it does. I mean, everyone thinks that art is it something you do because there's a DOS course. That's the misunderstanding of art. It's like, oh yeah, you do art because you're not good at academically, but art is a calling when you go to university, and you do it because you don't do it for the money. Let's be honest. It's never been about the money. It's something deep down that you quite like cathartic. You have to put something down every day to be the artist that helps you, and that's the artist I am.
So when did your art making, how did your art making start and come about? What did you start to play with? What materials and sort of how did that?
A sketchbook and pens and pencils, because they were cheap. Growing up in poverty, I didn't have much, so drawing on a back of a napkin or a piece of paper that someone chucked away. That's key for it. So I used to draw a lot of comic strip stuff. Maps, I was a big fan of drawing maps, cartography if you want to call it other words. And I was just drawing all the time. And then when I was in school, primary school, and you had those competitions for drawing cards and and you get prizes, and I always used to win. always used to win, and that gave me oh yes, I won something, you know. I didn't do sport, you know, I wasn't built for sport in such a way. I suppose I was a geek or nerd, if you want to call it that way, but yes, winning prizes and giving that adulation of winning something through your art is amazing.
So I know, I mean now, I mean, you know, looking at your wonderful jacket, and I know you've got more colours, and you know, you obviously got your Braille. You've found Braille. When did you how did you come about finding Braille as kind of your, I suppose I would say it's like the defining thing of your art form?
It is,
and how did that come about?
Well, obviously I was blind in one eye from the age of 6. And I always said to people how I see it's like looking for 1,000 dots. So I was a big fan of pointillism from that age. I knew what pointillism was, and it's weird. I used to do a lot of pictures using felt tips and crayons. I've always used dots in my artwork. And then, unfortunately, left school at the age of 14 due to bad kidneys. But I got my degree. Later life, I got a degree in model making. Became a dental model maker. And then 8 years ago, I started losing sight in my other eye. And it wasn't like, oh my God, I'm going blind. It was like, right, I'll be the artist I want to be. And it happened by accident. Someone gave me a Braille typewriter, Perkins typewriter. This machine is amazing.
Who gave that to you, by the way?
So I used to play blind cricket for Hampshire and Sussex.
Nice.
I was opening batsman, and one of my teammates, Dave, said, "Oh, I've got this typewriter. Would you like to borrow it?" I goes, "Yeah." Obviously, I knew about Braille, but I didn't realise how it was made. And this typewriter was amazing. This design's not changed since the 1930s, and it's like playing an organ. You know, 6 keys, and at those 6 keys, you create the alphabet. So you have to, you know, playing tunes on an instrument that prints it off. And because I'm an artist, I got fascinated with the patterns. And it was like, well, obviously, you know, we're taught A is A, B is B, C is C, because it's a shape. It's not a letter, it's just a shape, but we're told that. And there's no difference to learning Braille. And I was like, now Braille is not meant to be seen. So what if I blew that dot up, made it bigger, kept the pattern the same, can it still be read as Braille? And it did. And it was like a light bulb in my head. It's like, this is it. This is a way of telling stories, a way of connecting my art with my sight loss, and being that artist that has a pointillism in his background. And I've not looked back since, and that was 3 years ago.
And you've produced so many different variations of Braille now, haven't you? I mean, could you just give me a few examples? I mean, I know some of them, but you've produced...
There's lots. So the idea is I take that English language, you know, the English language is abundant, we've got so many words, and I always use the Braille dot, well, not even to say the Braille dot, it says it, but the Braille pattern as a vessel to hold that word. So for instance, I did, in this exact building that we're filming in now, I did a project last year called To See Stars. And I used a Braille dot, but it was a Braille star. So you looked at it and it looked like constellations because of the nature of the pattern, but you could read it's still in Braille. You know, I've used drawing pins, I've used elliptical dots so I could like print Braille in italic, just as we have italic writing. So there's many alliterations, and also I use colour a lot. You know, colour for me is really important, even though I don't see colour.
Which I think, when I met you, was the opening of Decoding Braille, Decoding Me, wasn't it?
That was.
And
yeah,
so that's all to do with colour, not just so the colour of the background and the colour of the foreground. I think really, I suppose that was the start of this journey, this last phase of this journey for you.
It has. The idea of I wanted to make Braille universal, and for people with sight to actually understand it and learn it. And the best way to do that was colour, because our brain will start to remember colour. It's like how we learn logos. You know, our society is full of visual society, of so much stimulation. So by adding the colour to a pattern, that brain, for someone who can sight, can start to see how those patterns, and before you know it, you learn in Braille without realising it, because your brain is an amazing tool. And it still could be read through touch, so it has the both worlds of visual and tactility.
That's amazing. I mean, part of what I love about your art is that it bridges the world between something aesthetically beautiful and something that has a message filtered into that art. And obviously we've spent a fair amount of time together over the last year and a bit, travelling around different buildings, different cities, different galleries, different museums. And we often have chats about accessibility, don't we? About the smaller things and the larger things. I don't know if there's any sort of the way that you would describe your art pushing the boundaries of accessibility.
Well, I suppose I'm very unique. You know, the idea of when my exhibitions go up, there's big signs saying, please touch the artwork. You know, and obviously we're taught not to touch from an early age, especially when we go to big galleries. There's all these barriers put in the way. But the idea is to break down those barriers, metaphorically for myself as a blind artist living in a visual world, but also for people to understand that art can be interacted in a way that can be touched, and then we ask questions about sight loss. It's like, oh, that's pretty to look at. Oh, I can touch it. You don't have to learn Braille to understand it, but the idea of actually physically touching something gives you a different emotion that you would normally have without just having a barrier put in front of you.
Yeah, and that extends out to all types of disability, isn't it? I mean, one of the phrases I think we evolved in our own language was difference rather than disability. And, you know, quite often when we're talking now, we just talk of differences to sort of understand.
Yeah, the word disability is a strange one. I think it's a political word that was brought in, you know, 50s and 60s to say, you know, like say about difference, but the idea is, so politically, I'm disabled. I'm disabled, I have a label, disabled person, because I'm blind. Right? But the idea is, you took away the dis, right? So disabled comes abled, disability comes ability. You know, and I think we're in the 21st century now. I think we should look at that. I'm a word artist, I'm a typographer. We should look at that word disabled, disability. And again, why is there that tick box exercise when I apply for things? There's always that box, are you disabled? You know, again, it's like I said, it should be, are you different? You know, maybe we should start changing our language.
Words mean so much, don't they? I think quite often they fly under the radar. People would assume that they understand what words mean, but actually if they spend a little time thinking about the use of different elements in words, you might realise that they're not quite suited for purpose. And I think an experience that we had just the other day in an online meeting, wasn't it? Someone was sort of made an assumption about how that as a blind person you might like them to describe their appearance, but that was a completely different experience for you, wasn't it?
It's a whole myth. The whole myth about, I mean, we've got this lovely film crew right here, right? Not one of them has said to me, oh, I'm 6'2", wearing black. You know, why would I need to know what these lovely people look like? The way of understanding and seeing someone is through conversation, is through talking. Because there's I don't want all that detail about what shoe size they're wearing, you know, what underpants they got on. You know, I don't need to see that, do I?
Well, I'm assuming not, because that's what you're saying, which is, I hope, the way that we work together, I think, is sort of just that illustration that you only give what's requested, not necessarily what you think you should. Which is going to be interesting when we run the marathon, right? Because there's going to be times when that barrier might be challenged because of, you know, safety and time and space and stuff. One of the other things I really enjoy about your work is that you're passionate about community as well and engaging the community in your work.
I think that is key. You know, the idea is slapping a piece of artwork on a wall, walking away and it there for 3 months and not having the engagement. My work is there to be engaged with. And like I say, we're talking about, I've got an exhibition at the Key Arts at the moment, and I went up there and I did a Zoom chat with a school in London that's got a class named after me. So I spent time showing people around my exhibition and then taking time to have those questions afterwards.
Wonderful. But I also know that you've done multiple things in Portsmouth, which are all about community engagement. I think, you know, your show at Aspects was completely come touch. It was like a playground inside a gallery.
Victorious was amazing. I mean, that's, you know, a year ago when we did Victorious last year, that kind of changed my life, and I think it changed a few people's lives while we were there, because we were engaging in something that was never seen at a music festival, the idea of a Braille trail.
I think it was a world first, to be fair, which I, you know, still think we should be shouting about. But
I shout about it every day.
Yeah.
Every day I talk about that, about meeting Etta, that young visually impaired child, out of a sea of 50,000 people. Me in my Braille yellow suit, out of all those people, we bump into a blind child. What are the odds?
And the outcome was?
She now wants to become an artist because she met me. She's become my biggest muse. She come to all my private viewings in Portsmouth, and it's been great. I gave her a piece of one of my artworks, which read out stroke, in braille, fluffy braille, so it physically spells out the word stroke because you have to stroke the art piece.
And that's just such a tangible way of illustrating the impact of your work. I think it's, fair to record numbers and, like you say, tick boxes, but Etta's life has changed because she met you and engaged with the work that you do. How does that make you feel about continuing and what you might like to achieve next?
For me, it is about that younger generation of vision impaired children. Obviously, when I was vision impaired, when I was younger, I was put in the back of the classroom because they didn't know what to do with me. I remember that, you have drops in one eye, you're blurry. So the idea of now these vision impaired children being actually in normal mainstream school is fantastic. Literally 20 years ago, if you were blind, you were shoved away to a boarding school. So now, obviously, it's changing, but the idea is they still need that support so they have a normal life and can compete with their peers that can see. So for me, if my art hopefully will come to that stage where I can start giving back and create a legacy where I can give away scholarships, I can give away technology, to the children that do need it, so that they can achieve one day. Why not have a blind person behind the camera at university? Wouldn't that be amazing?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I completely, and also access to anyone of difference. I think that is the ambition, I think. Certainly the way I sort of see your world evolving, spreading its wings. We've done a few other projects as well, which I think I'd quite like to talk about our trip to St Ives for our podcast. But first of all, I'd maybe just describe
the podcast.
What the podcast is and why.
Well, you changed my life. When I met you last year, my dog Size was having an exhibition, his big exhibition, and I've not been in an exhibition in 10 years. The sight loss, interactive art, just felt uncomfortable. And you just said, I'll just tell you about it. And I thought, all right. So we were just having like two blokes discussing in this exhibition, and it was great. And I think you saw the art better because you were describing it to me in a way that we were having a story.
Yeah.
And from that, we got Arts Council funding to explore that further in exhibitions, about talking about art as if we're two blokes just chatting about art in a pub, but we're in a gallery. And it changed my life. I was at London a couple of weeks ago, and I wish I had you there because I went to the Saatchi Contemporary Art Fair, and I've never, since I've not met you, like in those 2 year and a half, I felt so uneasy about being in a space where everyone was just blanking me because I was a blind person in a visual world, and no one was giving me the time to say, "Hold on a minute, do you want to go see cinema? All right, I'll explain what's going on." And but you've given me that. You've given, and that's what this podcast is about, really.
Yeah, encouraging people to just do the right thing and ask the question.
Why is a gallery a library? Why are we not talking in galleries? That's the key. We've been to so many now, and still we rock up when there's loads of people there because we don't shut the gallery down. We're not at VIP yet, but still, no one else talks. So you see us talking in the gallery, and people are just looking at us dumbfounded, like, why are they talking in the gallery?
Yeah, it does seem unusual sometimes, especially when the galleries seem open, friendly places, and yet, when you're looking at the art, everyone's got to be silent, like it's a library. I don't know if that's just our culture or tradition, but what's been your highlight on the tour of the podcast so far?
It's been Sculpture by the Lakes. Sculpture by the Lakes, because it was an amazing experience because I could touch everything, and I did. It was like the beam on my face was brilliant, but I was already describing it to you. I don't think you barely touched. I think you only touched 2.
Yeah.
Right, but everything I was touching, I was describing it to you because I had I could actually touch these artworks and the beauty of it and the texture, and it was amazing.
And I really enjoyed that experience as well. I think in some respects it's not often that you get to see art in that environment that way. Usually a sculpture outside might be one thing. Here it was all over the place, wasn't it? It was a real feast for the senses all over. What would you say has been perhaps the most challenging experience that you've had on the podcast?
I mean, you mentioned it's Take St Ives. Now, that's the biggest one we did on the podcast. Obviously, Tate is a big conglomerate art thing, you know, all around the country. And I was really getting excited about going. And the building was amazing. We talked about the building and the way it was located. It was brilliant. And we walked up to it and we opened up the door. And when that door closed, it was like a pin drop. And I felt so uneasy about talking about the art with you like we usually do, that conversation. One, it was a paid gallery, so I didn't want to upset people that were in there observing the art. But even for you, you couldn't really observe the art because everything had a barrier.
Yeah.
And it became, the actual gallery became so constricted. It wasn't, I don't think, unless someone told them about that, they just carry on as if, you know. And then we were going to see the exhibition at the end of it, which was in this amazing, massive room. The colours were so vivid, it looked like a playground. There should have been noise and joyfulness, but because we experienced that trepidation of going through that section where you couldn't talk, it kind of like made us feel like we couldn't talk in the other room. So I'm really interested for when that podcast comes out, because it's good to have these juxtaposition of a gallery where you feel very excited, like the sculpture by the lakes, but having role reversal in a gallery where you feel constricted, you feel like you don't belong. You shouldn't feel like that.
No, and hopefully that's something that we're both in our own way trying to push and change. I'm just thinking, should we take a look at what Claire's been doing?
We should do. We should find out, after all our babbling, what's been going on.
Are you coming round?
Yes.
Do you want to join?
In the middle?
I've got to sit in the middle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what have we got?
So
Mother?
I've been doing a little doodle, listening to you talk about your journey. So I've done my normal doodling, which always includes a bit of a ship over here, and talking about your dreams and aspirations and your passion. And then the key words I picked up on were a difference, and the community seems like it's really important to you. So yeah, and I've just done a little eye with a keyhole in it, because I say when I look at your eyes I can see keyholes in
It's
there.
weird, isn't it? Yeah, I wear the glasses because, one, it makes me look cool, but also, especially under these lights, the glare makes my eyes really bad. So
Yeah.
it's not just a fashion statement. I do wear them for a purpose.
So the ship represents community.
And your journey, yeah.
So it's
And we're all in the same boat together.
And this journey's not ending, is it, Steve? For me.
no, absolutely not. And so I suppose the doodle leads us on to what's next, Clarke.
For next, I mean, we're sitting on this amazing sofa right now, right, at Portsmouth University with these amazing students in front of us, you know, trying to craft out their career, their journey, their path. And I see myself on the similar sofa on the likes of Graham Norton. Why not? Why can't I be the famous artist that people are talking about, like they talk about Damien Hirst and Tracy Emin? I have to be famous to make a difference, because if I'm not seen, pardon the pun, if I'm not seen, how can I make a difference? So I'm comfortable on this sofa, and I want to be on these chat shows. I want to be on the League of Their Own and Mock the Week and, you know, Loose Women. I could do a Loose Women all the time. Come on.
I'm sure you'll get there, Clarke.
Yeah. So I want to be famous, you know, and appear on Strictly Come Dancing, because that's what I want. That's what I strive to be.
Well, if you continue the trajectory that you've been on, then there's really no reason why that won't happen. So how do people find you online, that type of thing?
So my website is a great website. It's seeingwithoutseeing.com, and it's all the links are there. Linked to the podcast. It's all linked into my Instagram, and I love Instagramming because it's just a way of communication again. And I always do the journey as well. We talk about journey, so I always post about how I'm going on, and yeah, I'm enjoying life. I really am.
Tremendous. Thank you very much. Thank you for such open answers, and hopefully we've shown you why art matters.
That's it. Thank you, Steve and Claire.